Think it's time we rise up, people. It's time's up, people. You can talk all you want, but it won't change a thing. I wanna know what you do.
We're here. Let us fire tear gas. Throw the canister back at them. Who got gloves? Who got gloves? Throw it back at them. There you go. Somebody threw the tear gas back. Oh, man, my fucking eyes. I got some, thank you. I'm suffering the effects of tear gas right now.
Hey, we got milk too. Some milk.
I'll take another water, man.
More water. Hey, more water over here.
They got more water.
Come on.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Solidarity. Solidarity. I'm not leaving. You gotta be willing to die in these situations. I'm not leaving. I got 2 bottles of water here. I don't know what the hell's going down, but they don't seem to care about the vanguard group here. You guys can feel in your eyes too, right? Motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Up and Up. I'm Jodi Newell, and I am here with Al Suarez. Al Suarez has actually been a guest on my show before. He was here to talk to us with David Torenheim about what happened with the Venezuelan embassy. He was an embassy protector. Since then, he has actually written a book, and I'm really excited to find out more about this and to talk to him about that. Thank you so much, Al, for joining us today.
My pleasure. A lot's happened since last we spoke.
I'm sure, yes. Please fill us in. Let's just start with the basics. I mean, so let's kind of go about, what has happened since we last spoke, and what brought you to wanting to go ahead and write this book.
Yeah, almost exactly 2 years after these original actions as covered in the film and the book happened in May of 2020, soon after moving here to Jacksonville, Florida. It was kind of my welcome to Jacksonville experience. I went to a BLM protest, with my comrades at Black Lives Matter in the downtown area, and I was tear gassed. And, in my 20 years now of activism, never been tear gassed up till then. I've had pepper spray near me. I've witnessed brutality, blood, all types of things of that nature, bulldozers, snipers, all of that, of course. But to actually be tear gassed and the way I was tear gassed and all the evidence I had, the video that I had, and nothing being done about it, very frustrating. I don't see how there couldn't have been a class action lawsuit, because under U.S. law, they didn't just do it in Jacksonville. I don't want to say exclusively Jacksonville. There was dozens of cities throughout the country. Right. In the summer of 2020, last summer, that had these things happen. But I can tell you what happened over here. So what happened was I went to a Black Lives Matter protest that was thousands. It was very large. And it seemed to die down, and so I went home. And then I got a phone call by one of my comrades here in Ugly named Larry. And he said, Al, they're tear gassing people. So I immediately went with my car and went as fast as I could without getting ticketed back towards the protest and parked as near as I could where the protest was, over in a parking lot where Burger King was. And I walked down and I started filming, and I'm live on Facebook. This is before I was banned from Facebook, and I'm filming. And there was a gentleman. I said, where are the activists? And he pointed me where to go. There was about 500 SWAT team cops converging. And you know what I did? I went into the line of fire. So I went and I
Of course you did.
So I walked so they wouldn't stop me. They thought I was just another pedestrian. And then as soon as I saw the protesters, I ran up to join them. And there was only about 20 of us left versus the 500 SWAT team cops, full military gear, everything. They did not give a warning at all. My video was completely unedited. And even though it was taken down to Facebook, I was able to salvage it. It's on YouTube currently. But anyways, it showed us walking. It showed everything that ran up to the moment of the tear gassing. Absolutely no warning whatsoever. I want to say also, according to U.S. law, in times of war, it's illegal to use tear gas against enemy combatants. So that means that under U.S. law, the government considers American citizens more enemies than enemy combatants. That's just fact.
And we saw this in Washington D.C. I don't mean to interrupt your flow of thought, but we saw this in Washington D.C. where there was a back and forth between whether the things that they were deploying were actually against against our rules. And it was very clearly stated, even though the people who were talking about it, the people who were in charge, right, and saying whether or not, I think at the time it was I'm blanking on his name, but he was the Attorney General, William Barr. William Barr said, "Oh no, there's nothing wrong with
under
this."
Under Trump, yes.
Under Trump, exactly. This is when they were trying to clear out the. Anyway, all I'm referring back to is the fact that there was kind of this conversation about whether this is actually something that is legal to be deployed. And there was one thing coming from someone, but of course, literally, like on the label, it said, "This is what this is."
Concern that tear gas could dramatically increase the spread of COVID-19 among protesters. The issue has been highlighted in an open letter signed by almost 1,300 US public health and medical professionals, and it comes amid the nationwide protest against racism that's been raging for 2.5 weeks.
Oppose any use of tear gas, smoke or other respiratory irritants which could increase risk for COVID-19 by making the respiratory tract more susceptible to infection, exacerbating existing inflammation and inducing coughing.
Well, apart from coronavirus-related health concerns, there are other issues too. Prolonged exposure to tear gas or a large dose of it, especially in a closed setting, could lead to blindness. It can also result in severe chemical burns to the throat and lungs or respiratory failure, which can be fatal. However, Philadelphia's police commissioner does still argue that riot control agents such as tear gas remain the safest way to disperse angry crowds.
The deployment of tear gas was a means to safely diffuse a volatile and dangerous situation and restore order when it became increasingly clear that other measures were ineffective in accomplishing that necessary objective.
That said, virologist at Lancaster University in the UK, Mohammed Munir, does believe concerns about the use of tear gas are justified at this time.
Especially when we look onto the respiratory tract infection, they are very easy to be transmitted. And one of the contributing factors for the coronavirus to spread and take the whole world on knees within 4 or 5 months has been its respiratory route of transmission. So anything that can expose the respiratory tract or create irritation or damage to the respiratory tract is something that would certainly help the virus to penetrate into the body, otherwise which could be probably protected. So therefore, when it comes to respiratory tract infections and pandemics like coronavirus, certainly the keeping the upper respiratory tract healthy is a lot more important, and having the tear gas is certainly not a good choice in this condition in particular. So someone who is infected with the coronavirus or has asthma or other comorbidities in terms of respiratory tract infections or other autoimmune diseases, if they would be under the tear gas or similar kind of pepper, even that means that they will be coughing more, and hard coughing can let the virus to travel even longer than 2-meter distance that we normally observe. So this means the virus transmission would be even more, and therefore many people in the vicinity would be a lot more exposed.
So the U.S. media, after I gave a speech the next day after getting tear gas to St. Augustine, reached out to me, interviewed me. None of it was released. And RT invited me on Russia Today. And first time I've ever been on there. And I was on RT International. It was wonderful because this is back when I was on Facebook and I had comrades in Europe send screenshots of me on their TV screen. Pictures
now,
of me
which show? I'm curious because I mean, RT seems to it's like a platform, like Real Progressives is a platform, right? So is it what show was it?
All you have to do is put RT International Alex Suarez. I use my legal name Alex instead of Al, and it'll pop up. There's been thousands of views of it, still up.
You've been out on the streets, I take it, there in Florida. What's the atmosphere been like where you've been?
Well, I was at an event today giving a speech in St. Augustine, very close to here in Jacksonville. I am a local independent journalist and activist. And yesterday, there was violence by the police that culminated in the streets of Jacksonville that resulted in the unnecessary use, I can say that firsthand, I have live video, the unnecessary use of tear gas against peaceful protesters. People around me were peaceful, and we received tear gas, and I suffered tear gas inhalation with my other comrades there. And, this is a violation of international law. The United States, unlike other nations in the world, including Russia, has no respect for international law, doesn't sign on to international law, but preaches international law to other nations. But yes, we suffered from tear gas and all types of repression and arrests, and the ones that I witnessed were unjustifiable. The violence was coming from the state, from the police, against protesters that were yelling out slogans like Black Lives Matter, trying to fight for the rights of African American and other minorities here in the United States. And as a result, I was invited to an event today nearby in St. Augustine and gave a speech exposing the tear gas use and the abuses that the system is doing here.
The officer who was responsible directly for the killing, he's been obviously arrested and charged. The others have been dismissed. They're under investigation as well. Do protesters feel that is not enough? Do they want things to go further? I mean, what is the main goal that protesters are trying to achieve?
Sure. The majority of my fellow activists believe we need to have systemic change. So it's not just a question of the judicial case that's pending or the investigation that's pending in Minneapolis or the cities where there's been abuses. There has to be systemic changes to how police are hired, how they're trained. The whole system during this crisis is failing here in the United States. So there definitely has to be deep systemic changes, and we need to find a consensus on a list of demands so that those changes can be made.
Some people are concerned about this being the right time for turning out for mass protests. I mean, clearly what happened in Minneapolis was a tragedy, and people need to vent their anger, vent their concerns. Surely, though, there is a case to answer that people are putting others at risk during, coronavirus pandemic, where hundreds or more people could actually die because of this.
Right. The majority of us don't believe in conspiracy theories. We wear masks. We're responsible how we protest. And also, of course, the masks help with situations where tear gas, right? Because I've been to my share of protests and they've used pepper spray. But here they are violating the law, using tear gas. So, yes, we've been using masks and taking precautions and trying to social distance as best as we can. So we're protesting responsibly. But again, we're facing abuse and violence that's completely unnecessary by the state in Jacksonville and throughout the country.
Race relations, with the black community, the police, they've always been tense in the United States, going back to the protests of the 60s and way before that, decades, centuries before that. Do you feel the death of George Floyd is a turning point, can serve as some sort of turning point here, or sadly, can we expect this to go around in circles when there's the next case of unjustified police brutality?
Yeah, it's interesting you use the term turning point, because that's a term that I used in my speech today. And as a Latino, I feel sympathy. More than that, I feel empathy and solidarity with the family of Mr. Floyd, who's a fellow minority and African American. And yes, I think that it can be a turning point, that police can murder in broad daylight on camera. And unlike the case in New York with Eric Gardner, who could not breathe, in this case, actually, they're doing something in Minneapolis. But again, there has to be systemic change throughout the country.
Right, activist Alex Suarez, who's joining us live from Jacksonville. Thanks for joining us. Good to have you with us today.
And so this was like that night after giving the speech in St. Augustine, So after that, he's a Russian agent. We have to ostracize him. He can never speak at a BLM rally in Jax. He has to go all the way down to St. Augustine. So I want to get back to the story. So I'm with the crowd, and under U.S. law, you have to give a warning, and there has to be imminent danger. There was absolutely no warning whatsoever. And there was 20 of us walking home. The protest already died down, and there was 500 SWAT team cops, and they shot a direct hit at me. Right where my feet were. It's all in the video. And I didn't have my bandana up because I couldn't believe they were going to use it a second time. Right. And so I started choking. I'm choking like I've never been tear gassed before in my life. I'm teary-eyed and I'm choking. And as soon as I could speak again, because I was still holding on to my phone camera, as soon as I could speak again, I said, I'm not leaving. I'm willing to die. And it was like one of those moments where, it was a turning point for me. And I wrote a speech that night coming home after surviving the tear gas and surviving comrades around me being grabbed, their cameras being taken. I was able to smuggle my phone out and get in my car and get out somehow. Yeah. And so I put that video up and I wrote a speech that night because I knew the next day Larry was going to take me to St. Augustine. And the crowd loved it. And I said, what happened yesterday was not a riot, was not even really a protest. What happened yesterday was a revolution. And the crowd went wild. And it's so funny because people like Larry, great guy, but he told me, you can't talk about revolution here. He said, even the Democrats here are very conservative. There's very few third party socialist type guys like you can't talk about those things. But the youth loved it. You had all those radical Flagler students from St. Augustine that have been doing their own protests, try to take down the Confederate statue and all that. Mm-hmm. They were in the front row when I gave the speech and they were going nuts. And I said, you see, Larry, the youth are ready for this revolutionary scenario.
You know what the thing is? I think this has to do with, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think this has to do with, I feel like I've watched an interesting trajectory through like the Biden presidency of a lot of people. I was one of those people who woke up during the Bush presidency. I was raised a conservative. And so that was kind of like where I was at. And I just assumed whatever. And it really took that kind of like, watching the Biden watching the Bush presidency and getting through that, and then having this hope of Obama, and then realizing that this was a compromise. This was not actually going through and making the changes that we needed to. So I think a lot of times when people, at least of my age, and I'm not young, I guess I can't consider myself young anymore. But at the same time, that in common. Right. But if you're looking at it and people talking about a revolution, I think that's where it comes from. And I think that's why people are so receptive to it, is because we have come to this point where we have gone through the process with Obama of trying to do things the right way, or trying to do things like the prescribed way. And I think that a lot of us have realized that was a false choice. That was a false premise. That was not necessarily the way that we could go about it. And so revolution is appealing to people who know that they have tried to use like more establishment accepted ways, and they have not borne the fruit that they necessarily should. Right.
I want to draw a parallel with you because, as I said earlier, I'm 36. I've been doing protests since I was a teenager. And just like you, it started in the Bush years. No, it started in the Bush years.
I'm just kidding.
With the war in Afghanistan. That's when I really started protesting, about 17 years old.
Right.
And, so the first 9 months of the Obama presidency, I was living abroad. Mm-hmm. I lived for 3 years abroad until November 2009. I was in Spain. Okay. And I attended anti-fascist protests in Spain. When I lived in South America, my father's country in Peru, I attended protests when the teachers strike. So wherever part of the globe I was in, I was trying to take part in revolutionary activism, right? I'm internationalist, like Che was. I'm internationalist. That's internationalism is a tradition since my high school years that I've always tried to follow. And I always try to focus on what's going on abroad and how they can inspire things at home.
Very important. And I think a lot of people...
I'm trying to tie it now to the film because this is related. It's totally related. So within months of returning to the United States, one of the very first people I added on Facebook was Kevin Zees. Then after Kevin Zees, Margaret Flowers, then Medea Benjamin. So all these people that I connected with at Occupy the next year in Occupy DC in 2011, I would later run in again in forums throughout the years, maintain contact. And then comes 2019. So I'm going to be honest with you. When Trump took over, at first, I was kind of like laughing because, screw Hillary. And also like, he's not going to really implement these things. Then I was very depressed because he was implementing all those racist things he said he was going to do. And so one of the first things he did what really crushed me, because, I was a Standing Rock, was when he shut down the Standing Rock, our combat.
Yes.
And so I got to be honest with you. From 2000, I'm going to tell you something about Obama before I forget, but let me tell you this real quick. So from 2017, I'm not always chronological. So from 2017 in 2018, I did nothing when it comes to activism. I focused on my studies. And I kind of regret that now because for me, throughout my life, I'm always trying to be active, right? I'm going to protests lately again, I've always tried to be active, even if there's COVID, show up with a mask, whatever, Mm-hmm. I prefer a bandana, but, the reason why I stopped those 2 years is because Trump took over and it was very depressing. And I'm not the only one.
Yeah, okay? No, I hear you.
People say, watch, the left's going to be dormant now that Biden's in power. That's BS. Because when Obama was in power is when the left rose up. Mm-hmm. Towards the end in Standing Rock and in the beginning with Occupy.
And now,
And so-
doesn't that make sense? Because I think there is definitely a space for people who, and I'm not saying that you should plan this way, but what I am saying that it makes sense that people would rise up in the time when, okay, you're expected to rise up when there's someone like Trump in power, right? Because obviously it is this distinct affront that you need to rise up against, and all of the left is gonna, rise up for one reason or another, and it's easier to bring people in. But when it comes to the person who is in power being on your side, I hate putting it that way, but you understand what I mean. When it's like your side of the aisle, then it's like you're expected to just shut up and fall in line, and that is more frustrating than anything else. So yeah, I'm not surprised
I'll put it this
whatsoever
way.
about people
put it
standing
this
up
way.
in that context, because that's the context in which your position is being portrayed, and it's not accurate. Does that make sense?
And I'll put it this way. Trump never promised, to fulfill progressive policies, at least not in general. So there's more justification for the left to come out and protest when Biden promises certain things like $2,000 checks immediately, right after it was done in Georgia. And, Obama promised all these things, the public option. They had the full control. He did everything possible to prevent the public option and fulfilled that. And that was a disaster. So that gives the left more justification to go out and protest. When it's Trump and you're doing what he expected, it's like, what's there to protest? And yeah, it's Trump.
Right.
So what?
Exactly.
So I remember when I moved in 2017, within a couple months of Trump being elected to South Florida, Tampa was South Florida. When I moved to Miami, the Miami area, people went out and protested in the beginning and then just died down. But I said, watch, if Biden's elected, it's going to be like Obama. The left's going to get pissed off eventually and start protesting again. And you're starting to see that now, the reemergence of Black Lives Matter, Breonna Taylor anniversaries. I know Carmen drove all the way up from South Florida to Kentucky for that. So people are still protesting, and people are mad at Biden's betrayals. But people kept saying, even on the left, I'm not going to say names of individuals, but I'll point out even the show. I don't care. I've been on the Convo Couch. I used to be on good terms with them. But they came out and said we're saying you have to vote for Trump. And they also said things like Trump's election was stolen. We know that. And purporting all these conspiracies.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so I believe there are conspiracies, of course. There's been the things that were declassified, right? We know Gulf and Tonkin was a false flag. That's how Vietnam started. But you can't just go around saying every single right-wing conspiracy theory and claim you're a leftist show. Right. But that's true. And
See, but that's why it's believable. And that's what's unfortunate about it, is the fact that there is a kernel of truth, that we know that we can't trust it. So people are more susceptible to lies that take it that much further, because there is that kernel of truth that says, no, we're not being told the absolute truth.
You have one side of the extreme right that calls me, I don't want to say extreme right, but let's just say extremists. We're not going to even go into left or right at this point.
Gotcha.
So you have one group of extremists that say I'm a Russian agent because I went on Russian Today TV. They're the only ones that wanted to give me a voice at the time after I was tear gassed. And then you have another group saying I'm a sellout because I don't admit that Trump really won the election. So it's hard being a principled leftist when you have extreme groups like that. Yeah. So after I pointed out on Twitter to Convo Couch, hey, I'm a supporter of yours. I've been on your show, but what's this? Like, there's no evidence of mass rigging. And I'm somebody who was on the Tim Canova campaign. So I know something about rigging.
Oh, I support him as well.
So when I was in South Florida at that time, that's when he ran for re-election as an independent. I was one of the people pushing him to go independent and leave the Democratic Party. That's a fact. You can ask him. And so when Canova ran the second time, I was in the right place at the right time. I had contacts, that knew Canova that got me in his campaign. I supported him. Nobody could say I didn't support him at the time. And unfortunately, he's come out now with Convo Couch and other shows and said, you got to vote Trump a second time. And the election was stolen from Trump. And at least if you vote for Trump, they'll keep having protests, because if Biden, they're going to make the left fall asleep. And I said, no, that's not true, because under Trump, less people on the left protested. And under Obama, you had Occupy was predominantly independent leftists that didn't like Democrats. And people like Kevin Zeese were involved with that. And so people that were claiming to, support the actions at the embassy, they started ostracizing me and saying, don't support this guy's film. Don't give to his GoFundMe.
See, hold up really quick, because I can understand that argument. I'm having trouble grasping onto, and I think you're saying this, so let me just clarify and make sure that this is what you're saying, is that you're talking about people who were saying to vote for Trump. I can understand like voting third party. I can understand I can understand a lot of arguments, but it doesn't make sense to me to vote for someone who is the farthest from your ideology. Is this, hold on, what's the term that people say for it? It's the oh, what is the word? It's like pushing for a fight, right? And so you're what is it? It's exaggerationalist or something. It's something like that word, and I'm so sorry that I can't think of it right now, but it's
propagandist.
Yeah, no, it's a word that is people who really want to push us towards revolution, push us towards
I know what you're talking about.
Essentially an extreme.
You have to vote for the worst candidate to make things worse so that we could have a revolution.
Right, and there's a word for it that's not coming to my mind right now. I'm sure somebody in the comments is saying like, it's this word. I'm sorry,
it's probably like almost like a nihilist. Like they want the worst to happen, but then they think it'll be for good, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like pushing for conflict, right? And so that you get to the point where something good can come of it, because this kind of like wishy-washy bullshit conversation that we're having is not working. So I can understand that, but with Trump, like to vote for Trump seems like a pretty strange.
Jodi, I actually would understand that more. That's not what they're saying. You have people that are saying that Trump's more progressive than Biden. You have Canova who came out and endorsed Trump. I found that very disappointing. And you have Common Couch going to Florida and telling people here, they flew all the way from California and they came here to Florida. Well, to be fair, the co-host's from Florida, so he must have been coming and visiting family, but he brought Fiorella. She's a Peruvian American from California. And so I don't want to name names so much, but yeah, they both came to South Florida to tell the Floridians, if you don't vote third party or Trump, actually they said, if you vote Biden, you're a sellout. And they said that in the battleground state. And they went to the counties that were the purple, like the most close, and you're talking to somebody who almost my whole life's been third party. And I think third party, even now, whether or not I live in Jacksonville and I voted for Biden, I don't even get into that. But I'll tell you this, that I believe that third party people should be given a voice. And I always believe that there are people that have sold out that actually went and had pictures with Biden signs. I never did anything of the sort. Yeah. I never told people how to vote. But I'll tell you this, to say that every single person in Florida to sell out the voter for Biden, that's just too divisive. And so I started talking to them on Twitter and questioning what they were doing. And they used to support me and I used to be supportive of their show. So it's sad what happened.
But I think there's much more nuanced conversation. And unfortunately, what happens is it gets very oversimplified. But there is a much more nuanced conversation in there. But let's get back to your book, because right now, I mean, we're looking at we're running out of time, and I could talk to you forever.
The embassy protectors broke. First off, I want to mention some names of people that were supporters of the film and the book that passed away recently. Albert Strickland, Bruce Wright, Jack Lieberman, and of course, Kevin Zeese. And so I'm going to start out by reading the brief foreword written by Kevin Zeese's son, Alex Zeese. And the book can be found on Amazon. It's the same title as the film that we're still working on. It's called Embassy Protectors. Excuse me. My father, Kevin Zeese, was no stranger to civil disobedience. Growing up with an activist for a father, the entire concept of fighting injustice was something we were accustomed to. Although it did take him a long time. How much time? Half a lifetime, several decades, to get to the point where he would use civil disobedience as a tool for protesting. I remember the first time he was ever arrested for a protest. I was in high school and he was protesting in front of a federal building against the war on drugs, which was his core issue at the time. The week before it happened, he sat down with us and explained that he was going to be doing the protest and would probably be arrested, but that he wanted us to know he would be okay. There's a typical routine when it comes to political arrests, especially in Washington, D.C., where the authorities are all too used to protesters. After a while, you become desensitized. I went to hundreds of protests with him over the years, and I'd seen Dad get arrested many times for various issues. It came with the job, so to speak, and didn't faze me. But this particular action in the Venezuelan Embassy was very different. This was a political action where there was no routine for how the authorities would behave. And because of that, for the first time in a long time, this was a case where I was worried about what could happen once those inside the embassy were inevitably arrested. Alex Zeese, January 9th, 2020. And the next part I wanted to get into was the chapter on Kevin Zeese's legacy. I'm going to read the final portion on that. Kevin should be remembered as a man who was bravely dedicated to the cause of justice. Often he would come to your defense, even if not popular, as he did with me in the past. And in the end, he knew he inspired me to be a better activist and a better human being. And if I have chosen today like him, I will not give up the fight, the struggle of struggles for eternal justice for Kevin, for all the protectors and their sacrifices to advance humanity. Che Guevara, whose grandson I dedicated one of my books to, said once, the height of the human species is a revolutionary. If I could define Kevin in one word, it would be revolutionary. He was a revolutionary who believed in the cause and nonviolence, and whose tactics over the years were effective in both the legal world and political world. He knew how to play the game, how power functioned, and to do so with principles. It was an honor and privilege to have known him. He educated so many people in the early days in the embassy before the exiles arrived outside and they had to take measures to survive. We're educating people through him and Margaret's daily news activities, still maintained today. Popular Resistance, a site whom I wrote an article for. Kevin was kind enough to help me edit, for me. More importantly than just educating people, Kevin inspired as a true leader by example. So yeah, this is a film and a book that is meant to honor his legacy. But unfortunately, the left's very divided. And we could really use support for this final push because the film is 3/4 finished. And it's an educational film, it's a documentary showing what really happened and the background information and all of that. But the book, if you read it, it gives you an idea what the film's going to be about. It's not a long book. It doesn't show the script of the film or anything like that. But you have pictures and you have explanations of who the activists and the different roles that were involved there, and that part of our nation's history. Even Jesse Jackson was involved at one point, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yes, I remember that from our last show.
Yeah. And so, basically my co-director and I don't really speak anymore. So I published the book by myself. The film's almost done. The co-director was very helpful with the film for the first year. And, he should still be credited for helping the film. Mm-hmm. But I am intent on completing it. And Alex East might even help too, because he's a video producer. We're going to keep in touch on that. We might have his third trailer come out. But yeah, we need the funds. We're starting a new GoFundMe to get the editors together. But I was trying to say earlier, the reason why I shut down the GoFundMe was not just because of the sabotage and people saying they shouldn't give to these guys. I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, you're saying for the money, I'll just shut down the GoFundMe. And not only that, because COVID was happening. So I thought it was immoral. I thought we shouldn't be asking for money from people during the COVID crisis.
And so that was your choice, right? I mean, that's the way that you described it to me, was that it was your choice because you did not feel like that was an appropriate time to be asking.
Yeah, I mean, David maintained a Facebook fundraiser. I don't think it raised very much. Our main fundraiser was GoFundMe, but we didn't raise very much, and I decided to shut it down. I didn't think it was right. We would look bad, actually, and they'd use it against us.
It's a tough time. It's a tough time for everyone. So yeah, right. I totally get it.
Because we don't have a big network. I totally get, and I always support. Sometimes with $5, with whatever I can, right. To different activist networks, through their GoFundMes. I totally get that. But we're not known, and we had to put the film on pause, and there was really no reason to keep up the fundraiser at that point. Now, what I want to say is the past couple months, since this book came out and kind of trying to revamp to get the final quarter of the film finished so we can finally release it and try to distribute it, I restarted a GoFundMe. And so, yeah.
Yes, where can people find that?
Well, it's in the description on the show, right? We're going to have
Yes, we're going to have it in the description, but go ahead and say it so that people know.
I think it's pretty hard to find on Google. It might be if you put in Embassy Protectors Film Fund or something like that. I don't know, but the easiest way is just to look at the description of the show and enter it that way. And like I said, I was banned on Facebook. I was never given a reason. I asked for a reason. They said they didn't have to give me one. This was early August, within a month and a half, maybe 2 months after being tear gas. And so that was a network I built for 10 years that was destroyed. Yeah. And so that was a huge loss towards, being able to communicate with people to help support the film. And my co-director basically was detached from the film at that point. He didn't want to get involved anymore. And so I wanted to keep up the fight. And so I've been able to gather a following, not a big one yet, but on Twitter. And I'm always posting about the book and about the film and about the causes that Kevin fought for. And so it was an honor to get in touch with his son after the Zoom memorial. But yeah, there's been a lot of loss, I just went a month ago, drove out to St. Pete, Florida, for Reverend Bruce Wright's memorial. He was one of the first people to interview David and me. He had known me for years. We had traveled together for years. And and he was a big supporter of what happened at the embassy, a big supporter of film. And there was like 4 or 5 people that passed away. I think I just mentioned 4 of them.
Yeah.
In the past few months. You know, Oliver Strickland died in Mexico. He was a guy who was one of our top contributors on GoFundMe, and just loss after loss. And then Kevin Z's himself, who was always going to be the main person we were focusing on for the film. He was very important at the embassy. Just a lot of loss.
Yeah.
And a lot of division. And I think it's time for the activists to unite and put egos to the side and try to have this truth come out, because there's nobody else. It's been 2 years, and there's nobody else that's doing a film on this.
I think you're absolutely right. And, but, you know, essentially when it comes down to it, you know, I think we all in the movement have our place, right? And so there are, you know, no matter what your perspective is, what your unique perspective is, you bring that to the table, and you bring that with full force, right? You know, a movement is not so that everyone can necessarily compromise where they're at to get to a unified position. It's, I think it's more so that people are using all of the tools. People are coming from all different perspectives and ultimately unifying around the same thing, you know, in whatever, but it's not for people to compromise their values in order to fit into what like the movement says it is, you know. I think there we run the risk of you know, going establishment, honestly.
There was unity at the embassy because it was literally life or death situation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially people like me who knew of the termination of Kevin. And Kevin admitted it to me on my show after he got out of jail. You know, after these actions, he said, yes, I was willing to die. And, you know, I know them. I knew them for so long. I said, they're going to die from starvation or thirst if this continues. I knew it.
How did Kevin die?
He died of a sudden heart attack. But the siege, he died on probation, by the way. So he was still being harassed by the courts to fulfill certain probations, but it was a victory because they had a mistrial. Then they gave them very less charge with probation for a few months, but he still died on probation for actions that he took part in. That was his whole life. His last article he was working on before he died was on Julian Assange. So he was a big supporter of Assange. He came from a legal background. And so he was involved in all the same causes than I was. Assange is still being persecuted. And so I wanted to tell you, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I wanted to tell you something about Obama earlier as well. So a lot of people say, like, to feel superior, like, I voted for Jill Stein twice. And I did too. But let me tell you, when I was in Europe, I applied for an absentee ballot. And even though I was familiar with third parties, if I got it, I never got it, I would have voted for Obama the first time around. So even me, that will shock a lot of people what I just said, because they always say, oh, Al's the third party guy, you know. And now we're trying to say I'm a sellout, but it's whatever. You know, even me, I had some hope in Obama in the beginning. But like you, I got disappointed by 2012. And like you also, I started my activism in the Bush years. So we have that in common. And that happened to a lot of us in the Bush years, not just Iraq war, Afghanistan. We saw Afghanistan, not necessarily conspiracy. Like I found out right away when I was a teenager about the pipelines. I said, they're trying to extract oil out of Afghanistan? What is this? I thought it was about defending us from 9/11. And, you know, you start questioning things when you're young. And then now I'm in my 30s now, and that's how you emerge as an activist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, at the end of the day, I hope that it ends up becoming part of a trajectory that leads us to a better place. And I, you know, I think it's interesting at this point. We were just talking before we actually started recording. We were talking about history and Howard Zinn and people's history and these kind of things. And I think it's interesting to look at the situation that you're in, and not necessarily knowing what the end of that is going to be. But yet when we look at it from, you know, George Bush to whatever, and honestly, when I look at it all the way back from, you know, the Reagan years, you know, which is literally when I was a baby. Like I was born the year that Reagan was, you know, was brought into office, you know, was
I talk to people 19, 20
but to look at kind of this trajectory, but of course we don't know where it's going to end up now.
You have these 19, 20-year-olds.
Looking at it in the middle of it.
But listen, I go to a protest. You have these 19, 20-year-olds. I love them to death. They're doing great things. And a lot of them advocating socialism. They're doing great things. But you start talking to them about Occupy Wall Street. They say, what's that? And, you know,
which is so funny. Like it's
hear me out. You have people that were co-founders of Occupy DC, Bruce Wright and Kevin Z's included, who have passed away. And it's just sad, you know, that these youth that are feeling inspired to go out and protest, they don't know the history of their own country because of how it's been covered up by the corporate media. And that's why it's on us, because I come from a journalist background as well, even though I changed my major to history recently for my grad school. It's on us in the alternative media to show them that history. And how do you show them history? With books, with documentaries. But a lot of people don't want to support it because they get egos involved. Or I was there too, and I'm going to do the thing. Trust me, there's nobody else. It's been 2 years that's doing a film. I'm the only one, and I'm asking for everybody's help. And I want to put differences to the side. If you're for truth, if you're for showing our recent history, Occupy is going to be mentioned in the film too. It's mentioned in the book. If you want to know the truth and want to help inspire future generations, come and support this film. I'm willing to take on producers. It's not about name recognition, for me. You know what I mean? I'm willing to add more names as producers. Give people credit for any support.
About understanding where we've been so that we can move forward in the right way.
For example, John Zongas had a death in the family. He's a great man. He was very close to Kevin. He's contributed for Popular Resistance as well as I. And John Zongas was offering me on my radio show the other day, just before the tragedy. Now I'm giving him time to grieve. A lot of his film, his footage, which would be for the final quarter of the film. We have 3 quarters done. So I really hope to get back in touch with him and whoever else wants to support and add to that GoFundMe so we have funds to pay those editors, those students, or whoever's going to work for us to get it finalized so that we can show this part in our history. And I really appreciate your guys' support.
Absolutely, and we're happy to have you on. I'm very, very happy that you reached out. I'm so excited about. I'm excited to read the book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So anyone in our audience, we're going to have the link down below for the GoFundMe account to support this. And if you have the means, please do that. It's so important. Like Al said, it's very important that we support people who are putting out accurate information, people who are marking our history, because if we don't, it's going to be glossed over, it's going to be changed, and we're not going to remember it, which means we're not going to learn lessons from it. So absolutely. Thank you so much, Al, for coming on today. Do you want to put in your last 2 cents before we wrap it up?
Yeah, like you said, if it's forgotten, right? I mean, that means that all the efforts were in vain. It can't be forgotten. That's the importance of history. And they say that history is written by the victors. There should be a Howard Zins type history written again for the new generation, the people that were oppressed. For example, down here in Florida, Harriet Tubman came to Jacksonville to bring runaway slaves to the Seminoles. And the Seminoles defeated the U.S. Army in 3 wars in a row, never defeated. And the Black Seminole Nation of runaway slaves and Seminole Native peoples were undefeatable. This is just a fact they never teach you in history. But that just shows unity against all odds brings victory.
Yep.
So we should learn from that.
Yep. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully we can check back in with you. Everyone, please make sure you check out this book. Make sure you check out the film. Make sure you support however you can. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, share, and contribute if you possibly can. I mean, I know everybody's hurting these days, but really, any little bit helps. If you can support us, then that really helps. And if you can support Al in his publishing this book and things like that, let's get the true history out there.
Hey, those motherfuckers use tear gas, man. I was here earlier. Is it true they use tear gas? Those motherfuckers, I feel it in my eyes, man. They're trying to come down on us right now. Tear gas. Gunshots. This is America right now.
Ain't shit without that bag of guns. Look, I'm gonna get the fuck on. Goodbye.
The police are getting closer. I came just in nick of time. This is the diehard right now. We are the fucking diehard right now. We reinforcements right now. We need to regroup and retake. That's what you do. Live right now. Everybody in Jacksonville, hear me? We need to regroup and retake. Right here, represent Northside, Jacksonville, working class, black and brown. There's not only a few of us left. We need reinforcement before they come and arrest us right now. Those motherfuckers use tear gas, for real? Hey, question. I'm an independent journalist, activist. I was here earlier before the tear gas. Yeah. As soon as they told me that it happened, I came to show my support. Good. How long ago was the tear gas? Who did they shoot it at? The tear gas
Yeah, I'm live.
2 hours ago. 2 hours ago.
There's a car on fire right now.
Okay, that's probably not far from us. Yeah, I got you. So that was one of the fellow activist comrades here, and she just told us that the tear gas commenced about 2 hours ago, and there's a car on fire not far from here. I don't know where. This is a place I could find, and you saw behind me that these assholes are getting close to us. They're getting close. They're getting close, but we're not giving up. We're the diehard over here. It's gonna go on all night. Anybody in the Jacksonville, St. Augustine, even Brunswick, anybody in the area needs to come on down here. Sheriff's Office of Duval County, Jacksonville. I'm at the corner of Duval and Main Street, and the pigs are behind us. They fire tear gas. I can feel it in my eyes. It's a moment of history right now. They were trying to block us from getting in. I was able to sneak in through. I parked my car at a Burger King nearby and went on foot the rest of the way. I don't know where that burning car at. Fuck the police. Motherfuckers. Around Unity. We got comrades on motorcycles. I don't know what the fuck's going on, man. Hey, brother, you don't mind if I ask you something? You mind if I ask something, brother? They had tear gas 2 hours ago. No, it's okay. No, it's okay. So I was here before the tear gas. As soon as I heard that they started that, I drove back to show my support. So I'm just wondering, I'm live. You don't mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the tear gas started 2 hours ago, right?
Yes, sir.
And I heard is it true that an officer fired gunshots in the air when they were trying to take his car or something like that?
Yes, yes.
Oh my God. Did anybody get hit from the ricochet? Anybody get hit from the ricochet? Did the bill fall down? Nothing? You don't know, right?
I don't know.
All right. Yeah, I felt it in my eyes as soon as I got here. That's chemical warfare. That's against international law. These American citizens, they use tear gas. This is fascism. This is what fascism is in America. This is what fascism is. This is what fascism is. Fuck the police. We need to regroup and retake. Everybody needs to, I need reinforcements right now. Regroup and retake. That is how revolutions start. Regroup and retake. I would say at the height 2 or 3 hours ago, there was about 3,500 comrades. Now, I don't know, 100 or 200, but people need to, that fled earlier, need to come back. We need to have reinforcements. We need to take the street by street, regroup and retake. This is the diehards, but we need people here now. We're here. They just fired tear gas. Throw the canister back at them. Who got gloves? Who got gloves? Throw it back at him. There you go. Somebody threw the tear gas back. Oh, man, my fucking eyes.
Water?
Thank you. I got some, thank you. I'm suffering the effects of tear gas right now.
Hey, we got milk too. Some milk.
I'll take another water, man.
More water. Hey, more water over here.
They got more water.
Come on.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you guys.
It's all dirty. It's all dirty. I'm not leaving. You got to be willing to die in these situations. I'm not leaving. I got 2 bottles of water here. They were offering to give milk away or something. I don't know what the hell's going down. But they don't seem to care about the vanguard group here. You guys can feel in your eyes too, right? Motherfuckers. I felt that. Who needs water? I got an extra bottle of water.
We got one.